Hey there, long time no see. Yeah, it's been a while since I've made a video for this channel. Life has been in some ways unkind to us, in a number of ways unkind to us since the last video was made, and when I went through my little heart deal, figuring out what was going on there, that kind of threw a wrench in things, but here we are. This is September, Labor Day, and there's been some significant changes in our lives, not only COVID related, but otherwise related, that our life is changing here. And Shirley and I are about to embark on a great adventure, and it's one that in one sense it's been imposed upon us, and we really weren't ready for it, but we've taken the steps that we needed to get ourselves geared to do what we got to do, and we're about to launch out on a great adventure. And it's something that we want to invite you to follow along, and we're going to call it the Kodiak Chronicles. And essentially we're going to go travel and live in our Kodiak tent for a while. How long is a while? Do not know how long a while is. We're going to do it until. How's that sound? And we're going to see some beautiful places. We're going to breathe some mountain air. We're going to breathe some desert air. We're going to see some sunsets and sunrises and some lakes and mountains and streams and some other trees than we've been looking at here for these past years. And I want to invite you to come along with us. So I'm out here today. I'm going to dig the Kodiak out of the car where we put it back in March. We were getting ready to take off. Actually, it's been in there since February. We were getting ready to take off on a spring camping tour and just be gone for a while, and then the COVID thing came along, and that messed up a lot of people's plans, altered a lot of people's lives, and created a lot of hardships for a lot of people. And we're this far along. This is Labor Day, and we're essentially just waiting on a breath of cool air to come blowing in, and that's not long down the way. In fact, Murphy, North Carolina, this morning we looked at the weather. It was in the upper 50s there this morning, and we're getting ready to take off, and we're going to do the preliminary stuff that we've got to do in order to do that. I want to invite you to tag along with us. Go with us. Ride with us. One of the things about a Kodiak tent, one of the most important things to begin with, is when you've got it laid out, stake it down good, because it's freestanding, and without the stakes in the ground, the wind can blow it away. But there's something you can be assured of with the Kodiak: it'll stand up to gale force winds. And we had that experience in March of 2 years ago. Gale force winds coming off of Strom Thurmond Reservoir, 40-45 mile an hour winds, terribly cold. And we put the Kodiak up in that kind of wind and spent the night in it. And when we woke up the next morning, it was 25 degrees, and we were just snug as a couple of bugs in a rug. One of the things too with driving the pegs, and I learned this doing reenactments from a friend of ours. Instead of using a hammer or the pole side of a hatchet to drive your tent pegs, make you a good maul. And what that does, instead, you know, you've driven tent pegs before. Every time you hit it with a steel hammer head, it just gets broader and broader on the back of the peg. Eventually, you'll have something there that'll cut your finger. But With a maul, you don't have that sort of thing going on. And you can make your maul either, this is a medium duty maul. You can make a heavy duty one, a big whopper. Our first introduction to a Kodiak tent was in Kentucky. I believe it was in September of 2017. We'd gone up to Kentucky to participate in a skills weekend, a skills day with Mountain Bushcrafters Alliance on Pine Mountain. And one of our good brothers up there set up his Kodiak 10 by 14 so that we wouldn't have to set up a tent. And we lived in that Kodiak 10 by 14 for essentially a long weekend. And driving back down here to the swamplands, I mentioned to Shirley, I says, you know, I'd really like to have one of those Kodiak tents. And she says, I was thinking the same thing. So we went online and we ordered this thing up. They're not cheap, but they're virtually indestructible as long as you don't build a fire inside of them and burn them down. They're well made, and putting them up is, it's not that bad a chore. What's affected me putting it up, I don't know if you can see that or not, 6 months of sitting around here doing nothing because of COVID-19, and then getting into the hot, brutal summertime, and all that on the backside of having to have my heart explored to find out what was going on inside of it. I have put on what I'm calling my COVID-20 in 2020. I'm heavier than I've ever been in my life, and I got to lose this garbage because it affects my wind, it affects everything, and it slows me down. But standing it up, most of it one person can do by themselves. It takes a pretty strong person to get the side poles lifted up high enough to get into that hook to hold them in place. And if you can't do that, you can always do like another friend of ours does that bought a 10 by 10 Kodiak. He just takes along a little piece of wood, slips it up there, slides it up there, and sets that pole on top of the wood, and that keeps it from sinking into the ground. So there's workarounds for just about anything. One of the reasons that I wanted to stand it up was to take some measurements. You know, thinking about any given camping trip, when you're out there and you're subject to the elements, it's going to rain. Unless you're strictly a fair weather camper and avoid any kind of periods of time when the weather is predicted to be inclement. And so one of the things in looking at our situation and planning on being out there for a long time, not living in our car, but living out of our car, one of the things that I wanted to take into consideration is the weather. And so one of the things that when we had Fred, our camping van, I worked out a system where I could tarp over the whole van. It had a high top, a turtle top, and I used a 12 by 24 tarp, and I built three PVC Schedule 40 upright tent poles, awning poles that come apart, they break in the middle, and that's what I'd use, and I'll take a picture of those. I've got them set up on another tarp right now, but I'll take a picture of that and show you what I'm talking about. But to use something like that, when you get into these several day periods of time when the weather is rainy, and to be able to do a complete tarp over. The tent itself is good in the rain. First trip out with it, we spent 3 days camping in the rain. Wonderful tent, not a problem. But the problem is not with the tent, it's with our outdoor kitchen. Now we've got a screen house that we carry, but it's good in good weather, keeps the bugs away from you. But that large tarp, to be able to suspend it over the entire Kodiak and create an area where you can set up and do your cooking and do whatever you need to do, or if it's not blowing a rain, you can simply sit out there in your chair and enjoy listening to the rain fall and watching it rain and that sort of thing. So it just simply having that advantage improves your camping situation if you get into a period of time when the weather is bad. These are the awning poles that I made from Schedule 40 PVC pipe. And the center pole is 7 feet tall. The 2 side poles are 6 feet tall. And that gives you a little bit of a pitch on your roof to assist with drainage, and plus it gets it up a little bit higher. I'm 6 foot, so I don't want the front being 6 foot, having to duck every time I go in. Now, they're simple to make. They come apart in the middle, and the ends, I put caps on the ends. For the top, I drilled a hole in the top cap, and before gluing it on, I installed 5/16 by 2 stainless steel carriage bolt, and run a nut down to hold it. You know, carriage bolt, you don't need a double nutted deal, but it installs from the one side, and run a nut down on it and it's there. And the stainless won't rust and get all over your stuff. But that's a convenient thing to have. And so we're going to carry these poles along with us. And since they come apart in the middle, they don't fill up the car. But there's something else I want to show you that's going to assist us in a great way to accomplish what we're about to accomplish. We call it our Toyota carryall. One of the things that we did a number of months ago, we took the back seat out of it and built a platform so that we could more easily carry our camping gear inside the carryall. And that it made it easier, for one thing, to put our stuff in and out. And another thing, it increased our capacity, our square footage, by enough that it's really worthwhile to do that, especially when it's just the two of you, or there's people live in their cars. I mean, that's one of those things that you got to be creative and do what you've got to do in order to do what you need to do. And so we did a little mod. We got the back seat stored up in the loft, and that'll go into storage so that we have it if we ever need it again, the back seat. And the other thing that we went ahead and did, we bit the bullet, so to speak. The parts have not arrived yet, but they've either already been shipped or they will ship on Tuesday. We went ahead and bit the bullet and bought a good quality topper, rack for the top, so that we can install a cargo basket up there, and not to so much to increase the poundage that we can carry with the little car, but by having that extra space, we've got a waterproof bag that will fit onto the inside the basket on top of the load bars, and our light fluffy stuff that takes up so much room inside the car, especially the light fluffy stuff that people need when the weather is cold, bedding, extra clothing, those sort of items. Plus, by having the basket on the top, we can easily carry along a 20-pound propane cylinder. Tie it down, it's good to go, and using our propane heater in the tent will be a much more cost efficient that way by having the 20-pound cylinder. We've already got the cylinder. We've already got the adapter hose to hook it to the Big Buddy propane heater that we use in our little cabin in the wintertime, and it will also attach just as easily to the Small Buddy that we carry when we go camping that uses the 1-pound cylinder. So that's the deal on the Toyota Carryall. Queen came out and she's looking through the screen. Say hello.
Hi.
And so that's what we're engaged in, getting ready to do.
Can't wait, can't wait.
And we're calling this, initially we're calling this adventure the Kodiak Chronicles. And we're going to chronicle long-term camping in a Kodiak tent. Going and doing and seeing and just being, breathing air. God's made us a beautiful world to live in, and by golly, we're at a point in life where we're going to go see some of it. We're going to see as much of it as we can, and probably meet up with some people that we know that are out living full time in their vans. So we're looking forward to that as well. Stay tuned for more. Here we go.